Welcome to Gun Owner Against Violence. Today our guest is the Libertarian candidate in the Massachusetts U.S. Senate race. Carla Howell, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about your campaign and how it's going.
We've got a fabulously exciting third-party grassroots campaign here in Massachusetts, Libertarian Party campaign. It's perhaps the biggest third-party campaign in America outside of the presidentials. So it's very, very fun. We've got tons of supporters and volunteers. We've raised almost $700,000 as of mid-October, and we're just going gangbusters.
Wonderful. That's very impressive. Can you tell us a little bit about the libertarian philosophy?
The word libertarian comes from the root word liberty. Libertarian means individual liberty and personal responsibility. Now, libertarian government is small government, very small, constitutionally limited government. We say small government is beautiful.
I like that. How are you different from other candidates who say they are pro-Second Amendment?
Substantially different in most cases, for two reasons. First of all, I am 100% pro-gun. I will go to Washington, D.C. to repeal the Brady Bill. I will vote to repeal the assault weapons ban. I will vote to repeal all of the 22,000 plus federal anti-gun laws in the books. And I will vote against any new anti-gun legislation. Every time, no exceptions, no excuses. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a lot of candidates out there that call themselves pro-gun or pro-Second Amendment, but then they'll say, but I would vote for reasonable gun regulation. It's always reasonable. This is what piecemeal gun prohibition is all about, trying to find some excuse, some reason why we can supposedly infringe on our right to keep and bear arms. But that is a violation of the Second Amendment, and I will not violate the Second Amendment. I put the Second Amendment first. So that's the first way that I'm different from many of the so-called pro-gun candidates. The second way is that I'm committed to making government small. With big government, our gun rights are always at risk. Big government has the resources to fund lawsuits against honest gun owners, gun dealers, and manufacturers. Big government has the resources to fund a BATF, to continually dream up new anti-gun laws, more piecemeal gun prohibition. Small government doesn't do that because it can't, because it doesn't have the resources. Small government is limited just to those functions specifically authorized in Article 1 of the Constitution. It has no resources to infringe on our right to keep and bear arms. That's why we have to not only repeal the anti-gun laws, we need to make government small so our gun rights are always safe.
Okay. To get a sense also of the numbers of people we're talking about as far as gun owners that you're representing, how many gun owners are there in Massachusetts as well as in the United States?
Well, my understanding is that there's about 1.5 million gun permits that have been issued in Massachusetts, so you can presume from that that there's pretty close to 1.5 million. There's probably more criminals who don't have permits who have guns, and there's probably some people with permits who don't own guns at the moment, but it's probably in the ballpark of 1.5 million gun owners. And in the country, I've heard numbers of 40, 70, 80 million. I know it's very substantial.
Yeah, I've heard 60 to 80.
Okay.
Yeah. What is your interpretation of the Second Amendment and our constitutional right to keep and bear arms?
The right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That means any weapon of self-defense, there should be no laws whatsoever governing the ownership, the sale or manufacture or transportation of those weapons. None.
Okay. Now here in Massachusetts we have something that's known as Chapter 180. What exactly is Chapter 180, and should we as responsible gun owners be concerned about it?
Well, the big problem with Chapter 180 is that it gives the police chiefs of all the different cities and towns in Massachusetts the very broad powers to deny permits, to set what the standards are, what kind of testing you might be required, training classes you have to take, and in some cases they are just outright denying everybody permits just about. So whether you can own a gun anymore in Massachusetts is a function of what town you live in, which is ridiculous. And of course, it's a gross violation of the Second Amendment, so it's completely ridiculous to begin with. But it's one of the most stringent statewide anti-gun laws in the country, and it is just doing a great deal of damage. Of course, these laws don't help, and it's it's badly hurting the sportsmen, who many of whom can't hunt anymore, can't even own guns anymore. It's causing dealers to shut down. It's a very, very big problem.
Okay. As far as crime and violence, have you found states with tougher gun laws have a lower rate of crime and violence because of the tougher gun laws?
Well, what the studies that I have heard about is that when you take a given state and you remove the right, you reduce the right to keep and bear arms, particularly if the concealed carry laws are repealed, you see a surge in violence. And when you repeal the anti-concealed carry laws, the violence goes down. So comparing state to state or comparing country to country is difficult because they're all so different for a variety of reasons. But if you take the same state or the same country and you change the laws, what we see is that more stringent anti-gun laws results in more violence, and repeal of those laws results in more safety, a reduction in crime.
If I may play the devil's advocate for a moment, I'd like to ask you to respond to concerns of people who feel it might be extreme or fanatical to repeal all 20,000 gun control laws.
Well, what's extreme and fanatical is to keep passing laws that don't work, that in fact make things worse. Yeah. And recently this study came out by the Journal of the American Medical Association, which confirmed the studies of John Lott, that the Brady Bill has had no effect. It has not improved the crime situation at all. It just has no impact. So what is fanatical is when you keep doing things that don't work, but it's worse when you do damage with a law. And this is where a lot of people who are legitimately concerned about violence, no one wants to see anyone get hurt, that the anti-gun laws actually disarm people who need protection. A woman who's been raped or is being stalked or fears these things wants and needs the ability to be able to carry self-defense. Minority families living in rough parts of town who call their 911 number and it goes unanswered till daybreak. These people really need protection. The elderly and the frail who have no other defense if somebody comes breaking down their door. These people need the right to keep and bear arms, and that's why we cannot disarm them by passing these anti-gun laws. So the first thing I would say to the people who are really afraid of guns is to think for a minute about these people who really have a serious problem and do need the right to keep and bear arms. The second thing is, if we really want to reduce violence, which everybody does, and of course gun owners are foremost in that. They are people who've been leaders in safety. One thing we have to look very seriously at is the drug prohibition. The drug prohibition is directly responsible for a lot of deaths that are occurring, homicides, to people under the age of 20. Now the Handgun Control Inc. folks then put these numbers on a poster on the Mass Pike or in their literature, claiming that these are deaths caused by guns, but in fact they're deaths caused by the war on drugs. So we need to recognize this is the way to reduce crime. It's obvious. It's exactly what happened during the alcohol prohibition, drug prohibition. Both have dramatically increased violent crime. And anti-gun laws increase crime as well. So if a person is serious about doing something about crime, this is what we have to look at. These are the issues we have to really deal with.
Good. How would you respond to an anti-gunner's concerns that about crime prevention methods that don't call for gun control?
Well, I just named one that I think does not have anything to do with anti-gun laws, and that is repealing the drug prohibition, because this is where kids are dying. They're dying today. We can stop it immediately and start to immediately clean up these horrible situations in cities where kids have nothing better to do but to go after the obscene high profits that attract them in the drug trade. When we end the prohibition, that incentive goes away. And these kids are then going to have to turn to the legal sector, the free market, to learn to get regular jobs, to get training in jobs, to learn that you're not going to make it by joining a gang, that it's just not an option anymore. You have to learn to get by in life more peaceful ways.
Okay. And as far as other ways to deal with crime or violence, are there other ideas of ways to go about that don't involve gun control?
Well, we already have all kinds of laws against murder and all the other nasty crimes that everybody's against. And these are the things we should be focused on. If we, again, repeal the drug war, so much of our law enforcement is focused on the drug war. And they have incentives to do so because, for example, if they confiscate your assets, they get to keep them. And they get brownie points for more prosecutions and more arrests. So it's easy to arrest some kid with pot rather than focus on the people who are actually threatening us and actually causing real violent crimes. That's where we need our police force and our prosecutors to be focused.
A readjustment of priorities, if you will.
Very much so. We have filled our federal prisons with 1 million nonviolent drug offenders. We've gone from a 1 million to a 2 million prison population. Many of those are nonviolent. Those are people who are there because of Ted Kennedy's policies on the war on drugs. He forced through the Senate mandatory minimum sentencing. So whereas we let people out of jail, sometimes in 6 years, who've committed murder, there's people in jail on a mandatory minimum sentence of 10 years, 20 years, life, when they have not harmed anyone else. That's just a crazy priority. Ted Kennedy wants to continue these policies. Ted Kennedy wants to write new anti-gun laws. I call for an immediate repeal of the drug prohibition, pardon and free the nonviolent drug prisoners, and make room in our prisons for the violent criminals, and go to Washington, D.C. with an eraser to erase the anti-gun laws. That's the Carla Howell platform, small government.
Sure, sure.